start, and I'm afraid of losing more hair.
What am I most afraid of? Public speaking engagements like this.
I was asked once that question. I told the interviewer that when I was a little bit younger, there was an old house in our compound, and I was so scared of that house. I was afraid that somebody, my mother, would leave me in that house all alone. So that's how I developed my liking for horror. So I just imagined that I was there. So that's how I started in horror writing. By the way, since I'm a new writer here, I'd just like to introduce myself. Since Budjette and David are known writers of misprint, I am Bart Coronel. My pen name is Coronel. I wrote tragic theater.
All of you are horror writers, and since you know many horror stories, which movie, book, or comic book scared you the most?
Well, the one movie that really scared me was first there was The Exorcist that was shown when I was in grade school, and then the other movie that scared me was The Exorcism of Emily Rose, because for me exorcism is a very serious matter. So it can happen to anybody. So it's a very relevant topic. That's why I wrote about exorcism in my book.
For movies, I guess for me it was The Omen, because I was a kid when I first saw that in the theater, so that stuck in my head. In terms of horror writers, late 70s, early 80s, hands down it was Peter Straub, and then of course Clive Barker came around, Poppy Zebright, a bunch of others. But yeah, if it's a horror movie, it's Omen stands out in my head.
I actually don't watch horror movies because I'm too scared. I won't be able to fall asleep, but Aliens was the one that scared me a lot. As far as writers are concerned, it was, grew up reading Stephen King. And then of course, as far as comics are concerned, it's Neil Gaiman, Alan Moore when he did Swamp Thing, and some of the works of Warren Ellis. So those are and most of the time it's stories that don't really scare you or surprise you. It's the stories that leave you disturbed, and that's why you end up not being able to sleep at night.
Thank you. Next question. We would all like to know, of all the genres, why did you choose to write horror? Why did you choose to write horror?
I guess that's one thing that interested me. So sometimes you write something that you really like, a topic that you really are interested in. So you can share more of your stories and experiences.
I guess I chose horror because I grew up with it. It's something I love. It's something I understand. But I think beyond that, the nice thing about horror is it's a very good staging area for you to talk about other things. One of the best examples I can use is the original Dead trilogy by George Romero, where it was about zombies, but he used that as an arena to talk about, he had social, political, cultural commentary. So that for me is what's interesting about horror, is that on the surface you have the thrills, you have the scares, you have all of the boo stuff. But beneath that, if the writer is inclined, you can add things that people might have a more difficult time accepting if they watch it in a social drama. So you have that cloak, and it's kind of a stealth thing where you can get serious stuff out there without people realizing that that's what you're talking about.
Exactly what Dave said. No, it was more of, it was a trying to do other stuff, I guess. Trying to do comedy, trying to do stories about college life. But one of the first jobs that I got out of college was we were placed in a very small radio station, and we were given 1 hour to fill up, and they said, write anything about the supernatural. And we thought, we can't fill up 1 hour's worth of supernatural, so we cut that 1 hour up, and we got 15 minutes, and we told ghost stories. And it was, yeah, pretty similar to what Bart said. You grew up listening to these ghost stories. Nagtatakutan kayo basta may brownout. Or it's what your mom or your yaya will tell you to scare you and make sure you go to sleep. Or in the case of my dad, it was his way of making sure that I sleep beside him. He would tell me, wag mo kayo iwanan sa kama, may multo sa labas. So ako naman parang, really? So I end up staying with him. You end up growing up, it's only here in the Philippines that you get to see a headline in the tabloid talk about a manananggal attack, and it's an official report. If you think about it, it seems to be part of our culture. So, parang in a way, sometimes you're really just retelling the stories that you grew up with.
Thank you, sir. Next question. There are a number of people who don't get the basis of the appeal of horror. So, for you, are horror stories nothing more than just getting cheap thrills?
Well, we all get scared once in a while, so I think horror is part of our life, even from our childhood until in our adult life. So I think it's a very relevant topic since it's also about life somehow.
Well, I guess my response to that is tied into my earlier answer. Yeah, with horror kasi you have the surface things. Another good example is Scream 1 and 2. Let's just forget there was a third one. But Scream 1 and 2 were really, really excellent examples of slasher films. But at the same time, they were commentaries about the slasher film, about pop and film culture, about the audience of horror movies, and about horror culture. So for me, that some of the best horror out there is the ones that work on these multiple levels. So you know, like I said earlier, it's a stealth thing. You know, you give them something that scares them, and maybe, hopefully, some of that audience will realize the stuff that's underneath. You know, kind of looking at a picture, and suddenly there's actually like an apparition there. You didn't see it earlier, but it was always there.
Yeah, I guess there have been a whole lot of stories, of horror stories that just stick to a very shallow level of wanting to scare you, of something jumping out of the shadows and just making you scream. But as Dave and as Bart has said, there's so many other things that can be done within that genre, and if I will cite a specific example, it's for one of the stories in Trese. Growing up, I would hear stories about certain celebrities who, for some reason or another, became super popular all of a sudden. And it was attributed, supposedly, that they have a duende taking care of their career. So, but at the same time, when I wrote that story, it was also trying to make, it wasn't a conscious effort to make a comment about it, but I had no choice but to talk about this is what happens in showbiz. You sell out. Sometimes you get so popular and so famous, you forget about, you just become addicted to the limelight, and that's what you fall in love with. So it also becomes an exploration of characters and what do people do when they are faced in a certain situation. It just so happens that there are duendes and manananggals running around in that particular story. So yes, it can definitely, it shouldn't stop at just becoming a cheap thrill and making somebody jump out of their seat.